Hi, and welcome to another episode of Conversations with Eve and More. Remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel on YouTube or follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Our guest today is Adeyemi Hines. Would you like to be called Ade or Adeyemi?
Adeyemi.
So Adeyemi is a community activist and cultural facilitator who specializes in the impact of colonialism and neocolonialism, both on those in the diaspora and those in Africa. He's also the founder of In Our Image, which we'll be hearing more about later, but you can find him and follow his page on Facebook. Just search for In Our Image. He creates and supports events and initiatives that celebrate and dissect Black culture and Black history. Born in Barbados, but raised primarily in the UK, he eventually made the decision to make the permanent journey back to the Caribbean and now lives in Trinidad full-time with his wife, Jennifer. So I thought this would make him a great guest to have a conversation with about both the benefits and challenges of repatriation, whether that's within the diaspora or more widely back to Africa. So welcome, Adeyemi.
Good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are. I would like to give thanks to the ancestors for allowing me to be here. Yes. I'm extremely grateful to share my story at this time. This week I'm saying we're doing a celebration for an old friend who has passed within the last month. And taking on that type of thing makes you very aware of your time and what is happening. So it's kind of apt that I'm actually doing this today.
That's beautiful. What's the name of your friend?
Shabaka Thompson. To another cultural activist. He used to be the director at the Santa Art Center in Ladbroke Grove.
Oh, yeah.
A Trinidadian, a cultural activist of many years. So it was a bit of a shock at his passing. That we've already had celebrations for him in London and in Tobago, and on Wednesday we're holding a celebration of his life in Trinidad.
That's amazing. Well, all I can say is thank you for everything you did. You clearly had an impact on the world, on our culture, on our history. And though I never met you personally, I'm grateful because, full disclosure, the person I'm speaking to, I know very well. So that is my brother you're watching over there, Mr. Adeyemi Hines. And if he likes somebody, I like somebody. So let's start with a little bit of your memories of your time in Barbados before you moved to the UK. When did you actually move to the UK?
We arrived in the UK in 1961.
So how old were you?
I was 9 years old when I arrived. I was born in 1952 in a little village, Sergeant Village.
Oh, in Sergeant Village.
Yeah. You know, so
what was that like?
My memories of the time is very idyllic, you know. Growing up as a child, going to the shop. My mother would send me to Mr. Weatherhead and I would be running down the road. And the local villagers would be shouting, "Give me your money." And I would be running, you know, so it was very idyllic. I also remember in 1955, Hurricane Janet, tree fell right in the middle of our house.
Wow.
We had to run out, and again we ran to Mr. Weatherhead for shelter. You know, when Mum came to England, I went to live with my aunt and my uncle in Roadview, St. Peter's. Again, very idyllic. I flew kites on the pasture, rode the goat on the pasture, ran down the road and across the road into the sea, you know? And I had a kind of secret pastime.
Oh, yes. What was that?
In the middle of the night when everybody else was sleeping, I would sneak out the house and go and sit in the middle of the cane field and suck cane. But then I would come back home and go to bed and wet the bed, and I would get beaten the next day for wetting the bed.
That sounds very Bajan,
So
very Caribbean.
I got round that by I got round that by floor, so the bed was so I couldn't get beat for that, you know. But like I said, memories of the Caribbean, very idyllic, very it's driven me over the years, and much of what I do now can probably be stemmed back from that type of time, you know.
Just the fact that you even remember Mr. Weatherhead and his name says so much.
Yes, it comes and goes. It took me a while to, you know, remember.
But that is the real community feel of the Caribbean.
Yeah, yes. Well, that's it. So Mr. Weatherhead was, you know, is Mr. Weatherhead.
I remember because I was there from the age of 11 to 14. And the rum shop at the top of the street was the place everybody went. Everybody knew it was the place you hung out, and everybody knew each other. And it was like young children running about. It wasn't anywhere where it was exclusive to adults. It was just a place to chill and hang out, play dominoes. And it was just that sense of nodding at everybody, people knowing who I was because of the shape of my lips. Oh, are you a Heinz? Are you a Bowen?
Can't get away.
No.
Yeah.
Did you have any of that?
I don't know. In terms of that, like I said, much of the banter in my younger days was about me running to the shop, you know, and things. But again, nothing that really stands out a lot to say. Well, you know, any kind of pressures at all, you know.
No.
If there are memories, they're all gone, you know. Remember the good stuff, and that's it.
Yeah, well, I have great memories of that time for myself, so I can really relate. So when you first came to England at age 9 with your siblings, what was your experience? Can you remember?
Well, I call it my innocent years, you know. Why? Because we came from a place which taught us to love the mother country, you know. We're coming to the place, the streets of England are paved with gold. We were coming to an illusion, you know. So the innocent years is basically being there, going through the rigmarole, making friends, going through a process, but you're still unaware of your own reality. That's the best way I can describe it. That's why I describe it as my innocent years. We're the naive time, you know. Not saying that it wasn't wonderful in its own rights, you know. It was amazing time to be alive. The
Were you living in London?
Yeah.
In Hammersmith?
You know, going into the time the Black Power movement would have been in its infancy. Anything, the civil rights movement was anything. And while I was unaware of certain things were beginning to impact me, you know, in terms of living in London and growing up in London as a young Black man.
So when did you first realize, though, for real, about some of the pressures as a young person that people of color faced?
Well, I think it would have been my first day after I left secondary school, you know. I think I went to get a job, and that's the first time I directly experienced racism, you know. I think it's good to go back to our schooling. You know, again, the same illusion continued through school. You know, we learned history, we learned about Christopher Columbus. You know, we learned about the mother country. Everything was geared towards that. And I loved history, I excelled at history. So I knew all the British kings and queens, etc., etc. In our school, the young Black men were mainly the athletes, the football team, you know. So we were on a thing. I was a promising athlete. Played football. I played rugby. So
You
I
played
was
rugby? I
cocooned.
didn't know about that.
Yes, I played rugby. They used to call me Chalky White. That tells you a lot.
How old
You
that
know?
was, yeah.
Yeah, that tells you a lot. So
Wow.
again, but because they couldn't catch me, I was so fast, you know. But as I said, that in a way cocooned me from some of the reality still that was happening outside of there. So that first impact of going out to look for work and experiencing racism was a kind of a little kick to the system. But going back, still there were signs along the way, like when we came, we were told don't mix with the other islands,
Really?
don't mix with the Jamaicans, they're trouble, etc., etc. Don't mix with the Africans. They say, oh, they eat kitty cat, you mustn't mix with them. Again, the attempts to keep us divided. Once we begin to speak to one another and realize that we're all the same people, it becomes difficult to keep us divided.
So speak to that for me, really, because that's a really important point that I think many people from our background have experienced, where the older generation was still sort of, I wouldn't say brainwashed, but they had a lot of old colonialist ideas that
well,
they were imprinted upon them.
We have to, in a way, be very aware of the conditioning. I used to have a saying which maybe seems harsh, but it's the reality. When a generation dies, part of that mindset, part of that brainwashing goes with them. But they were a generation in the same way I was told, this is the mother country. They grew believing that.
Absolutely.
So their conditioning is something that we need to understand. And a very good example of that I would have experienced in England. Now, one of the things that happened to me, Sunday nights we used to go to Metro and Abbott Grove, and we would use the train between Abbott Grove and Shepherd's Bush. And we would all have trouble either bunking the trains or something would be going on, But it's many years later, I realized that some of our elders had also experienced the same thing on the train. Yeah. But they'd never said to me, this happened. And it just literally came out one Christmas when just talking, that they've gone through the same thing. In their generation, that they would tend to, maybe they experience certain things and they would keep it, they would hold it inside.
Yes.
I'm not sure. So, for example, then, I only learned about the murder of Kelso Cochrane as I grew older.
Tell us about that.
Well, Kelso Cochrane would have been murdered in about 1957 in Abbott Grove. They classed them as race white. There was a whole uproar about Black people moving into the community, and there had been a number of incidents, skinhead attacks. And during one incident, Kelso Cochrane was stabbed to death, But those stories only came out in later, and that's part of the conditioning. These things happen, don't talk about them. And therefore, we have lots of stories like that, which we don't necessarily share, but which we need to share. 100%. Because it then warns the next generation what to be on guard against, Yeah,
I want to say that because I wasn't in any way implying that it's a negative in terms of the conditioning of the older generation. I mean, the hardships they face coming here, we know, we've seen, but it's exactly what you're saying. This idea of stiff upper lip, don't express your emotions, put your head down, get on with it, try and make it in this country under extreme circumstances. and then trying to
yes.
pass that down to your children who have a completely different viewpoint. You know, even I had a different viewpoint to you in your generation, and my children have a different one to me.
Of course.
Yeah, so it's really important to see the
yeah.
patterns that keep repeating, as you say.
Yeah. Yeah. So all those experiences, I think growing up in the 70s, also said that it's also now I'm part of history, because I would have been part of the music industry. I would have been part of, you know, the growing up and partying, the Lovers Rock movement. And now we see, like, so this year there's been a number of exhibitions and things about Lovers Rock and the impact of really a generation of party goers, you know, sound systems.
Tell us about the amazing time of music at that time, because it was such a powerful healing presence within our culture from here and America and the Caribbean.
Yeah. Well, I think, again, it stems from our generation and the generation prior to us and what happened to them, you know, being unable to attend, going to certain places, being excluded from certain places. So setting up our own shoe bins or party spots or whatever. And they were Blue Spot Gram, you know? Those are now part of our history. It has become part of our cultural history. But the impact of really young people at the time expressing, taking musical forms and expressing ourselves in a way which told our story, because it does, it tells our story, you know, and having such an impact on the wider culture. Because in reality, you know, those things wouldn't have done, from Janet Cave doing a #1 with Silly Games, you know, all those impacts of that upbringing, the culture.
Did you actually feel that sense of pride, that sense of, you know, these are my people, more than before that era?
I think we were part of a scene. You know, at the time, what I've said recently, maybe we have underestimated our impact. So we haven't yet come, other people are celebrating our impact. You know, I'm in touch with many of lots of the musicians and things. They're still around. I speak now and again. So I'm aware of most of the scene that's still happening in London, and those people are part of it. You know, we lost another great the other day, Neurish Joseph. He passed away in the last month or so. You know, again, another very impactful person in terms of the music, the culture, because not only singing lovers, but also singing culture. You know, so it has been very impactful. And like I said, maybe at times we underestimate our impact in terms of what has happened, and we will reassess it.
Absolutely.
You know, but it's a very important point in terms of that whole the whole scene in England. You know, one of the other things I would say also, then, how it then began to impact our cultural identity. So, for example, the experience of the Caribbean, you know, many of us will have grown up in Anglican and Catholic and things as such. But from the 70s, we're beginning to experience Rastafari, we're beginning to experience culture. And that begins to impact our identity, who we are. Because we're also learning that there's something more to being a paper or a cutout of who we're supposed to be.
Two-dimensional figure. Yeah.
Yeah. So they tell us, I think Bob has a song, they tell us who we want to be. Yeah. I remember the song, but the song kind of brings it all out, you know, and says it. I'm trying not to sing it because I
Oh,
don't
go
want
on,
to
sing it,
upset
man.
anybody
Sing
at
it.
this time.
But talking about underestimating, I think you underestimate the impact that you had on us and the people that you were around. Because I remember very young coming to Shepherd's Bush Market and seeing you guys at your record shop and seeing these dynamic, handsome, vibrant members of my culture that because we grew up in a primarily white area in Stevenage, to then come there and see, wow, you know, the food, the music, the
The
clothes, the
smell, the vibes,
fashion,
the whole thing.
the whole vibe. And these were confident people. You guys were, you're like, wow, they are strutting their stuff.
Let me tell you a story. It's one of my life stories in terms of, I remember leaving Stevenage one Saturday morning, you know, with all the white faces around us. And I get on the train and I come out of Brixton train station and it's like boom, impact, the colors, the smell, the vibe. You know, when you get hit on the head and you see stars in front of your eyes, that's what it's like. You know? So again, it tells us something. It tells us something in terms of who we need to be, or sometimes what we need to be around. You know, to spark us, to give us that little push.
To inspire
You know, sometimes
us.
the spirit needs it.
Absolutely. You know? So important. And so talking about that in terms of we're exploring the culture, and for me, I can remember also Gil Scott Heron and other people who were like revolutionary with their music, obviously Bob, and just that
Last
shift
point.
that was happening. Yes.
Last point. See, that's why I said the late 60s into the 70s was so important. You know, it's a changing of a generation. It's a changing of mindset. It's a creation of a new mindset. You know, we're now beginning to understand who we are, and therefore we begin to express ourselves culturally in a number of other ways. You know, and the impact of that. Well, this week I think they're celebrating 50 years of hip hop.
Amazing,
you know?
right?
So then it goes to see the impact around the whole culture. And
absolutely.
One thing I would say, one of the things that I observe about us worldwide, wherever we are, you know, we create, we develop, we impact culture. You know, so that's a very important observation because it's happening all the time. Sometimes, even at times, we think we're doing things as individual people somewhere, but at the same time, the same thing is happening somewhere else. We're connected culturally to our DNA, and that impacts how we do things, when we do things. You know?
Yes, it's driven. It's like it is a cultural legacy being born every day in some form or another. And to talk to that juxtaposition of seeing this amazing impact that those from the diaspora who came to these countries where we're told we're not enough and seeing that we're more than enough. Was there like a cognitive dissonance? Did you feel like inside that the message is conflicted here because what I'm seeing and what this society is telling me?
Well, that would have been very obvious for me. I think even within simple like the church. So in the Caribbean, the church is a very strict thing. Sunday afternoon, dress up. I remember in England standing across the road from the church, and the church is on one side and the bar is on the other side, and seeing people flock out of the church and into the bar, and it just kind of did my head in. Well, something doesn't seem right. It seems strange, you know.
Absolutely.
You know, so yes, there were a lot of times when you're challenged by what they say and what they do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so and it's still happening now.
It's
You
still
know,
happening. And it's just
it's still
particularly happening here in terms of European culture doing the
yeah,
same
yes,
thing. Yeah.
it's and again that's something that's and it's just not happening in Europe. It's happening in the Americas. You know, we're
Everywhere.
in a
Yeah.
very strange time.
Mm-hmm.
We're in a very strange time where they begin again trying to take control of the mindset.
Of
They're
course.
beginning to shape the narratives on how they want it to go.
Of course.
So again, I say like the pilgrims left and they went to America because they had disagreements with the powers that be here to
Mm-hmm.
set up their own little piece of whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And they've done that for how many hundreds of years in shape. And now again, they try to reshape that same narrative, you know? But the genie's are already out the bottle and there's no putting it back in, you know?
There is
So,
no that's why it's so extreme because they're trying their
mm,
darndest to cling on to their
mm,
narratives. So I just
yes.
wanted to like bring you to that shift where because you are a community activist and a cultural
Mm,
facilitator, what
mm,
was happening in your world that made you
mm.
think, I have an active role to play in bringing community together and challenging situations? Was it around like the riots, the time of the riots? Was it police
Mm.
brutality?
Well,
What was going on?
it would have started just before that. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I would have been working in the music industry probably, I think, from about 69, 70 to about uh, 79, 80. So I worked for
Mm-hmm.
children for a number of years. I had my own outlet selling music.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and basically, I was getting very bored, not bored, I think disillusioned with the music industry, you
Mm-hmm.
know, the way things were shaping up. Um, and that led into the riots, like in Brixton.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when that started, I was actually out of the country and I think I came in the Saturday morning, got some sleep and then watched over the next 2 days all the going on, you know?
Could you just give
And
people
then
who don't know that part of UK history what sparked the
yeah.
riots?
Huh?
What
So,
sparked the riots around that time if they don't know
well,
about that part?
I would just say police behavior. They were the whole sus laws. You know, they
Mm-hmm.
were stopping, searching. They were over the top.
Mm-hmm.
They had pushed through. And that's the finding in the Scarman report. That's the evidence I gave to Scarman. You know,
Wow.
they had in the area. They were they had gone too far,
Mm-hmm.
and they were going too far. That's
Mm-hmm.
that sparked it. And that's not the only place was
No,
happening.
no,
That was happening around the country.
absolutely.
Handsworth,
Yes,
you know,
top stuff.
Bristol,
Yeah,
yeah, top
absolutely.
stuff. So all those um things were brewing.
Mm-hmm.
Racism at work in the system, you know, that was the crux of the matter. So all
Mm-hmm.
of the arguments about this and that and this affected, yes, this affected you, but they weren't the spark. The pressure
No.
that was put on them was the spark.
Well, yeah, and in Brixton in particular, I remember it being and I think it's very strange now when I watch similar things happen in America where they think UK is not as extreme. But one of the
Mm.
things that sparked the riots in Brixton, if I remember correctly, was police breaking into a home of
Yeah, Cherry
someone who
Groves.
was searching for
Yeah,
someone and ended up killing, not
yeah,
killing,
well,
shooting and
yeah,
paralyzing the
yeah,
sister
Cherry
or the
Groves.
mother.
Yeah. So Cherry Groves, and then we would had other incidents. There's lots of incidents. Joy Gardner being
Mm-hmm.
going to a house, immigration,
Mm-hmm.
and wrapping her in cellophane,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and killing her, Mrs. Jarrett
Mm-hmm.
in Tottenham. You know, so those incidents were taking place, and they weren't isolated incidents. Those are the ones that got known. But
Yes.
going back to your question about activism, those things were happening around me, and I got involved in things like the Brixton Legal Defence Campaign, you know, this in small ways. But then also around that time, I I was arrested 3 times after the Brixton, but twice.
Mm.
I was arrested, even though most of the time I wasn't there. I was arrested once, taken to Brixton, they held me for a few hours, let me go. They arrested me a second time, all right, let me go. I said to myself, well, if they arrest me a third time, I might not come out this time. Let me move back to Stevenage. You know? And in that move back to Stevenage, that set me on another path, and that was getting involved with community work and youth work.
Wow.
You know? And that set me something of which I was much more satisfied in the music industry. You know, because more than anything else, I found it a very satisfying career. You know, I found it helping and working with people much more rewarding, you know, than selling them music. Put it that way.
Yeah, it's a really important point, and I like to bring out these things because when all the people I speak with, whether it's in this podcast or in previous ones, for me, I always see a thread whether you see it as a spiritual thing or a destiny thing or just a logical thing, something in life gives you these points where you make a decision whether to follow what's calling you from within or whether to be negatively impacted by what's impacting you on the outside. And some people we know end up going down the path where they end up, you know, in prison, out of prison, in prison. Whereas there's something inside of you calling you to something, and you have a natural ability to build community and to celebrate culture and to be a leader. And something in you decided to say, yeah, let me go this way, not just because of the pressure, but because it felt right. So speak to that if people who are, you know, maybe at a crossroads, what kind of things can they look at to say this path, not that path?
Well, one of the things that I always do, they say, listen to your heart, listen to your spirit, you know? If something satisfies your soul, you know, follow that. That's much more rewarding than money or gold or anything else. Follow what you love, you know? Do what you love. Like I'm lucky in ways that I've got paid many times for doing things that I love. You know, we had a tour once with Ernest Ranglin, Rico, Marjorie Wiley, and I was standing side stage, you know, and guitarist is on stage playing, and all I could keep saying to myself, I'm getting paid to be here. I'm getting paid to be here. You know, so I would have paid to be there, but I was getting paid and I couldn't get over the joy, you know, of getting paid to experience something that artist that I love and to be there as part of it, you know. So that's part of that joy, that feeling, you know, that takes you. And going back to my earlier thing about what drives me about the idyllic Barbados, you know, still that's part of it, that drove me. And getting fed up with the music industry was probably just natural because it's not a nice industry.
Yes.
There's not a lot of satisfaction in it. You know? So it's not something that would long term give me probably what my spirit needs.
Absolutely.
So therefore, give it up. You know?
Do you think that you were always very self-aware? Like able to tune in?
I've learned. I've had some very good teachers around me. Some people who, you know, have helped me to learn that, and for that I'm always grateful. You know, so I've come to even my age now where I'm happy with myself. I'm happy with who I am. I'm happy with what I do. And as you say, I see the impact on people. You know, so many stories, these things that has happened, and that impact has come out.
Well, give us some examples. I know that you've had, and to me, it's important to speak about the importance of mentorship.
Mm.
So, to give examples of where you've seen the change because you've supported other people and helped them to achieve certain goals. The
Well,
importance of mentorship,
there's
it
a few
can't be
stories.
overstated.
Yeah, there's a couple of young people I've worked with. One was a local gang leader, and they're always fighting and beating hell out of each other, you know.
Mm.
But overall, he was okay. Um, now I used to talk to them, and everything was good with them. You know, we had a good rapport. Well, probably I think it would have been about 10 years later. I meet him, you know. Um, and he's married, he's got a family, he's got a business, you know. And we talked about those times, you know, and the impact on him of those times. But you could see where it impacted his life and how things had worked out good for him, you know.
Mm.
That made me feel good. I also tell people about a story that youth club. I just gave a young man opportunity to rehearse his dance
Mm.
in in the youth club. I didn't do nothing much. Give him the opportunity to rehearse his dance.
Mm-hmm.
This young man goes on to be one of the foremost choreographers in Europe. He
Wow.
choreographed the whole French independence celebrations.
Oh my goodness.
He ends up being resident at the Royal Ballet.
Oh
You know,
wow.
I didn't do anything major. I've simply given the opportunity and the space. And sometimes that's all it is. It's providing people with the opportunity and space either to hone their talent, hone their
Mm-hmm.
craft, or being able to say this, do that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've seen it time and time again. And you know, a young man came running across the road with me one night outside the concert. He said, "Oh, do you remember me?" I said, "Yeah, from the youth club." He said, "Yeah, I want to thank you." He said, "Because of you, I've been around the world."
My goodness.
You know, so sometimes it's little things, but little things in the long run matter a lot. You know, so
Absolutely.
I'm forever grateful, and as it says, it's always ongoing. It's ongoing all the time.
Mm. Yeah, just believing, someone believing in you, makes
Yes,
such a difference.
yes. No, just know and just tell them, oh, do this, do that. I have a young man now. I've watched him grow from time he was 3 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he's now coming on to his 11th year. He's now become a master drummer, singer, calypsonian, you know. And the I've shown interest. I've just said, oh, do this, try that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And he's developing into a thing. And I'm just for the future. I look to the future, and I look to see where he eventually gets to, you know.
Yes.
But that's what
There's
it's all
another thing I
about.
want to tell you that you may know or may not know, that because in our family, you were the first one to go into higher education.
Mm,
And I think it's something that you took for granted, that you didn't
mm,
realize that you were paving the way for the rest of us,
mm,
because
mm,
we saw the struggles you faced as a young Black man growing up
mm,
in the UK. And we know just how nefarious,
mm,
some of the
mm,
influences around you were in terms
mm,
of institutional racism and police
mm,
brutality. And so for me, I just want to give you your flowers, your props, to say that
mm,
you always inspired me in multiple ways, on multiple levels. That, as you say, you don't always realize until after the
mm,
fact. Just seeing someone from your background, from your home, from your
mm,
situation, going out there and achieving certain things
mm,
that many in our society were telling us we couldn't achieve. I just want to
mm.
give you your props today, brother.
Thank you, and yes, I'm grateful, and that means a lot to me.
Mm-hmm. So, how did In Our Image come about? Tell people about In Our Image.
Well, me and the wife created Inner Image about, we must be 30, 40 years ago. And we
Mm-hmm.
call it a social enterprise. So again, it's things that we love. I love art. I've always loved art. Um, of love images of so it was a way we found of kind of marrying our loves with some of our creativity and what we do. And over the years it's developed and it's changed focus. Because one of the most important things is image. Now, Dr. Jeffrey says, he who controls your image controls your narrative. So most of what we see controls our thinking. So image is very important. So the concept of inner image is again to see things through our eyes, through our art, through our culture. And we try always wherever we are, to share that. So the impact of somebody looking at a picture and seeing themselves, because even now it's still in this day, in this country, there's some institutions that still have places named after the enslavers.
You're talking about in Trinidad or in UK?
In Trinidad. But we can go around, we can take that to the UK as well. And people say, oh, well, So for example, this weekend there's a big steel pan thing that they're celebrating World Steel Pan Day. The steel pan becoming, UN has recognized the steel pan as the first the instrument created in the 20th century. But they're going to Woodford Square.
Which is?
Woodford, Governor Woodford was a very brutal and horrible governor. So on one hand, they're celebrating an achievement, right? That's predominantly achieved by Africans, because that's where the steel pans come out of. And they're going to celebrate it in the square named after one of the most brutal governors in colonial history. So again, you get that schizophrenia.
Absolutely, that dissonance is so disrespecting you on one hand and raising you up on the other.
Exactly. But and there's lots of people, they're very proud of the steel pan, but they're not making that connection between that. And in a way, because lots of them are not told. Many have tried and many have asked that the square should be renamed, and it has to be renamed. But again, that's the schizophrenia of the place.
What would you say is, just to interrupt you there, just in terms of resistance, when you come across things like that, like over here, we had the toppling of statues after the George Floyd murder and the multiple shootings that were happening in America in particular. In terms of resistance, what do you think is one of the most effective ways to change something like Woodward Square? Or is it to do physical resistance? Is it to write to people?
It's all those things. We protested in front of the Columbus statues to be removed. It will continue to take pressure by activists, and there are activists here working on it, to change the names and to rename some of the places. And somehow they've got one or two, but it's almost a daily battle. One battle, win that one, move on to the next one. The toppling of the statues in Bristol and elsewhere over Colson has been in the making for a number of years. It didn't just happen. The lady of Solidified Maryland, who was mayor at the time, she came to Trinidad and she was part of that whole decolonization process that included activists from Trinidad, from the UK, and from the States. And all of them were working on this decolonization of public spaces. So that was the end outcome, but that had been going on for years in terms of working, chipping away at the blocks, So even now, things are, the reparation movement is coming up, and that's the same thing. People are chipping away daily at the blocks, making things happen, make things happen, daily, do what we can.
Yeah, and I would love to have you back on with a few or more others experts in the field around reparation.
Yes,
but in terms of
discussion.
repatriation, it's a much needed. In terms of repatriation, brings us beautifully back into that. What made you decide to make Trinidad your home? What was the events leading up to that? Because I know you were going back and forth, and but what was the significant moment?
It was meant to be. Let's put it that way. Because one, I see it as completing a journey that my mother would have started. Many of us came to the UK. The plan was to stay 5 years, earn some money, go back home. I'm just pleased that I'm able to complete, at least. I've completed the journey. It's been in making, like I say, from the idyllic lifestyle in Barbados to there was always something driving me. Always throughout my time in England, I always dreamed of building a house somewhere up in St. Peter's and returning to the Caribbean. It just happens to be Trinidad because I've married Jane. And I also think it's probably best that I'm here, because if I'm in Barbados, I'm not that. I can be detached from some of the politics in Trinidad. I'll be a bit more vocal, and they would probably either lock me up or kill me or something such. Some of the mindsets that you have to deal with. But it was there in the making. And again, another life experience also impacted me. One day I was in Brixton. I was selling records. I'm in the record shop and I'm playing the music. And this old West Indian man walked in, beautifully dressed, beautiful hat, wonderful. And he walked up to one of those giant bins that used for the rubbish, and he started to talk to the bin.
Wow.
And I laughed, but my stomach turned over. And my spirit told me, never let that age meet you in this country. That is a significant impact, along with the other things, of my decision, to return to the Caribbean. And it hasn't been an easy journey.
No.
Like, for example, I still haven't got residential status for Trinidad. It's been 14 years.
Wow.
And they've been going through papers. I've been backward and forward and battling with them over it. It may be coming near the end now, but again, it's part of the story. Like, even here in the Caribbean, we see each other as different islands. We still don't see each other as the same people. As Dr. John Clark said, the only difference between a Bajan, a Dominican, and a Jamaican is where the slave ship dropped you off.
Yeah.
But they're still, with their colonial mindset, they're still trapped.
Yes.
In that, that person's different. Like Trinidad. Trinidad is made up of so many Grenadians and Vincentians from the other islands because of the historical context. When emancipation comes, the people who are on these islands wanted to get off and go anywhere else. And the same from there, they wanted to get away from their plantation. So they went to other islands.
Yes.
So for them now to be talking about, you're Grenadian or blah, 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 this is nonsense.
It's ludicrous.
And they can't see it. Another nonsensical thing that I see here is where they were locking up locking up Africans from the continent for immigration violations.
Yes, that is complete.
And I'm saying to myself, do they understand the psychological impact of locking up somebody from the continent in a country that was created by your colonial masters and tell you that this is the rules?
Yes.
So these are some of the issues constantly, and there were many battles. There are many battles, you know. People have been abusing the detention centers and things like this. Yeah. There are many battles. But again, the schizophrenia of the whole thing at times is ludicrous.
Absolutely. You know? So, it is important to talk about the challenges. But what is the best thing about being back in the Caribbean?
My spirit is contented. It's difficult, like Trinidad is not an easy place in terms of the politics, you know. Some of it's really naive and childish, and they're still caught up in all the old political systems, so adversarial politics. I told them they're only 1.4 million people. There's no need to be adversarial about anything, but they still have the Westminster models, and they still do the stupidness, you know. So again, getting them to change that mindset, but everything is time. They will have to, because people will demand change. People will demand different ways of doing things, and it will come. You know, I just hope that some of it comes in my lifetime, you know, and see some of it. But
you know how quick things can change. So
yes, you see, and I know, and that's the thing. You know, change can only happen when people are ready. If people are not ready for change, no matter what happens, you know, I'm saying, and some that has to do with the mindset as well. Some that has to do with them still believing that this is the only way to do things. These are the only models that we have. They don't know no better. But that's it.
So I feel like we've really sort of explored the journey, but I wondered what your thoughts were before we end this conversation on, because you may know people who've made the different journey from, say, the UK or America to Africa. And do you think there's a significant difference between repatriating to the Caribbean versus repatriating to Africa, or are they pretty similar in terms of challenges?
They're pretty similar in terms of challenges, you know. Culture, different ways of doing things, you know. One of the most important things, though, we have to be very careful about is this whole mindset. We are Africans in the diaspora. We've got African bodies and we have European minds. So going into Africa with a European mind can be very dangerous for your own health and the health of the continent. You know, so we go there, we have certain expectations because we're used to doing it that way in England. That doesn't work, you know. Here, there are things that I see here that I know could be done better, but you almost have to leave them to let them come to that point themselves, because it's nonsensical. I'll cuss all day. You know? What's important to me? So I said to people, all right, here I've got sun, I've got fresh food, I can go to the beach when I'm ready, you know, and relax. So those pressures are a little part of the process. They're not insignificant, but I can deal with them because I have my other goodies, you know, and that's important to me.
Absolutely. You really remind me of something I was watching the other day where a young woman had repatriated to Ghana, and she said that even though there's all these challenges here with all these different ideas and constricted thinking and conditioning, She said, when I went back to UK to visit, I immediately felt like there was a cloud over my head. But when I went back to Ghana, I felt free. You know, I felt lighter, and I could deal with the challenges a whole lot better because my spirit was at peace.
Yes, and I think that's very much how I am at the moment. You know, my spirit's at peace. I can deal with any of the challenges they've got me, and it doesn't bother me. You know,
No.
It doesn't bother me. So I'm good.
Well, thank you, Mr. Adeyemi Hines, stroke bruv.
Thank you very much. It's been
for
very
coming on the show. Did you have any final words you wanted to share that I may not have asked? Anything you wanted to say?
I think in terms of what we've discussed, you know, we're a very important point in our history. And a lot of people are wondering um, why the continued push, you know, Africanism, Pan-Africanism, us coming together. As you said, we're at a stage in time where there's a global push for the hearts and minds of people. And that's also taking us down certain paths. And unless we reverse those paths, we're going to go down with them because these people are self-destructive. If they can't have something, they will destroy everything. And we're seeing that at the moment in terms of climate change. We're seeing that at the moment in terms of war, you know? So we are, politics. As a planet, yes, we're expending more hours daily on the planet. We need to return to some of our old ways, back to nature. You know, we need to return some respect to the mindset. You know, so that's, to me, that's where we're at, and that's what we need to continue pushing for. That's what we need to continue arguing all grounds on all bases. You know, because if we allow them to continue the way they're going to take us down with them.
Absolutely. That's a beautiful way to end the conversation. As
Thank
I mentioned earlier, just you can find Adeyemi on Facebook by searching for his name or in our image. And you can follow. He's got some amazing products him and his wife create. And he's also always promoting cultural events to uplift and inspire. Don't forget to follow our podcasts wherever you get your podcasts or subscribe on YouTube. It's always a pleasure. This is developing into a podcast that has depth and breadth and reach. And so I don't know who we'll be interviewing next, but I can guarantee you it will be as fascinating as today's conversation. So thank you, brother, for agreeing to come on today.
Thank you. Enough love and respect. And I really enjoyed, and thank you for doing this. I am grateful.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you all. Take care of yourself. Right. Remember to follow your heart and don't let lost in the system. Okay? All right. Till next time. Bye-bye.